Welcome to Echoing Faith Today, a podcast conversation on themes of impact and relevance in the new Directory for Catechesis from the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of the New Evangelization. I'm Dr. Jem Sullivan, host and faculty in the School of Theology and Religious Studies at the Catholic University of America. On this podcast, we'll hear from scholars, experts, and those in pastoral ministry. So welcome back, and thank you for taking your place at this table of conversation. In describing the nature of catechesis, the Directory for Catechesis speaks of the church in a permanent state of mission, and the catechist as a missionary disciple. So what is the relationship between mission and catechesis? To shed insight on this question, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Dr. Don McCrabb, Executive Director of the United States Catholic Mission Association. Don, thank you so much for joining in this podcast conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the relationship of mission and catechesis, and welcome to the podcast.
Jem, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be with you. It's very exciting to talk about mission and catechesis. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome, Don. Let's begin with the word mission, right? What does the catechetical community need to hear, need to know about mission as we continue to reflect on the nature, the tasks, and the sources of catechesis?
It's an excellent question, Jen, and I'll be happy to answer it over the next 5 days. No, it is a very big question because mission is really at the heart of what it means to be God. So Anthony Gittins, one of the missiologists, says that mission is who God is, and it's what God's job description is. So let's just unpack that a little bit. Let's kind of come down from the 300,000 mile level and just talk about what we think of when we think of mission. Frequently, before Vatican II, when you would say the word mission within a church context, you were probably talking about missionaries who were going to a foreign land. And the purpose of that was the salvation of souls and the establishment of the church. And it's kind of the idea being that this particular location, this particular place was like a blank slate, and that Christianity, the message of the gospel, has not been spoken there at all. And indeed, there still are some places on the planet where that is absolutely true. So we don't want to minimize that approach to mission at all. But then Vatican II happened. And with Vatican II, our understanding of church and of mission changed dramatically. We often hear the statement that it's not that the church has a mission, it's that the mission has a church. And I think Bishop Barron said it best when he says, church is mission. So if you can think of it this way, God is love and church is mission, and what's the mission? Learn the first law. The first law of mission is God is love. The second law of mission is the church's mission. And that's how close these concepts, these beliefs are related to us. And so when we talk about mission, we're talking about really how the church is witnessing, proclaiming, and serving the reign of God's love, salvation, and justice. And we need to think about that not so much in terms of where, but when. In other words, the gospel is to permeate every strata of human society. Not only the ordinary, but the micro levels as well as the macro levels of our society.
I think that really kind of, I love the summary of, the church, the mission has a church. It really puts that, gives that as a priority. It's the priority is mission. It's that mission that, again, Pope Paul VI said, the church exists in order to evangelize, to proclaim this good news of faith in Jesus Christ and the dignity of the human person in light of that great mystery of the incarnation. So I really appreciate that sense of giving priority to mission, and then understanding that the church is there to serve that mission, to extend it, to continue to be creative in its ways of extending that mission. So, um, you know, when you say when, the question of when, can you speak a little bit about that? So yes, the mission permeates every aspect of the church's life. Is the when kind of a timing question, or is it more of just a qualitative? How does this permeate all that the church does?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jem. Um, so, so one way of thinking about this is, I'm going to use the word, and this has really been very strong within the U.S. church, it seems to me, and it certainly was part of my reflections as I was developing. I served as a catechist, as a director of religious education for a handful of years. And, at the time, as we were trying to appropriate Vatican II, we spent a lot of time talking about ministry rather than mission. And one way of thinking of ministry is that ministry is really our service to the community. It's an internal focus. Mission always has an external focus, right? And so again, thinking of it kind of geographically, when we think of it as an external focus, what we're thinking of, okay, well, our job now is somehow to proclaim the gospel over there. So the question is over what's over there? Well, if we add more of a temporal understanding of it, then over there is not a geographical location. Over there is the boardroom that's determining how finances are going to be spent. Over there is the public policies that are shaping how the poor are going to be attended to. Over there are the people on the peripheries of our society. So, that's really a much finer point, right? And so, one of the things clearly, again, thinking of Bishop Barron, he has seen the nuns, the NONES, the people without a religious affiliation, as the people over there. And so that's in many different places within our culture, and the way we access them, at least the way he's accessing them, is through social media. So you can see that I'm talking about here, that's what I mean when I'm talking about the temporal dimension, that it really opens up so many places where we can begin to think about, well, I believe in Jesus. I want to proclaim his love for humanity. How do I do that in my daily life? And that can be through my mission to others. And those others can be really shaped more about by time than anything else. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, thank you for that clarification. I think that's really kind of opening up a paradigm shift, if you will, away from thinking of mission in terms of geography, and more in terms of the fabric of life itself that must be permeated with the light of the gospel. I mean, thinking of those gospel images, you are salt of the earth, you are light of the world. It's that sense in which it's all pervasive, and that's a very important shift, it seems to me. So thank you for kind of just focusing on our attention to that. In your work.
Jem, if I could just add to that,
Yes.
that's been part of our thinking for some time. And in the directory for catechesis, on paragraph 31, it talks about evangelization as an ecclesial process.
Yes.
And at one point it says, driven by charity, evangelization permeates and transforms the whole temporal order,
Yes.
incorporating cultures and offering the contribution of the gospel so that they may be renewed from within.
Yeah. That's
So you can see even in our own documents, this dynamic, this, as you said so well, it's that salt, it's that leaven that we are called to be. Now, mission sees that in a particular way.
right.
And so, that's what we're going to be talking about, kind of how mission sees that. But yeah, it would just, there is nothing that is human that is outside the grace of the gospel.
That's excellent, Don. And it actually calls to mind something that Pope Francis says in his recent apostolic letter, Antiquo Ministerium, on the ministry of catechists, where he's speaking about the secular character of the ministry of catechists. And I think that's exactly what he means in what you've just pointed and you've read from the directory. It's to permeate, transform the whole temporal order, incorporating cultures and with the light of the gospel. So again, a very important focus to keep in mind as we consider this question. Um, in your work, you're engaged with an extensive network of missionaries, both here in the US and around the world. Give us some insight into how missionaries might view the relationship between mission and catechesis.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Jem, for that question. Um, First, just to clarify something, or maybe illuminate something, I hope, we are all baptized. I mean, the assumption is that we are all baptized, and because we are baptized, we are by our very nature now missionary disciples. A missionary is one who is a missionary disciple that has a particular role on behalf of the church. So like the catechist, the catechist is really called by the community in one sense to help the community be formed in the faith, right? Well, the missionary is called by the community and is sent in the name of the community to others. So again, it's rather than inside the church, it's our effort to go outside the church. I like to say that it's through missionaries that the church embraces the world. And so, so the missionary is sent by the church to take the gospel to others. And again, those others could be in your neighborhood, in your backyard, within your city, across the country, or around the world. Okay. Now, having said that, one of the ways we think about mission is we think about it in terms of kind of the activities of mission. Two very prominent missiologists, Roger Schroeder and Steve Bevins, really wrote kind of the textbook on mission. It's called Constants and Context. Context change, the truth of the gospel remains the same. And in that text, they kind of give a description of what they call 6 expressions of mission. One expression of that mission is witness, and that's really foundational. And when we talk about witness, you kind of have to think about it this way. Any youth minister knows what I'm talking about, because the youth minister has to kind of immerse themselves in the young culture, so they don't abandon themselves. And of course, they will tell you, oops, I made a mistake. I abandoned my adulthood and tried to be a young person. but they are with and for young people in their culture. And young people do have a distinct culture that they're with. So being a person of integrity, those are ways of witnessing. How you listen is a way of witnessing. How you serve is a way of witnessing. How you engage and cooperate is a way of witnessing. And of course, the words you use are a way of witnessing. And so all of that, the proclamation of the gospel, the service we do is all part of witnessing. The other aspects of mission, the other expressions of mission would include worship. Also, it would include dialogue. That would be the third. The fourth is enculturation. And that is something that catechists may be particularly sensitive to. How do we speak the gospel in a language that the people that I'm called to serve can hear and can understand? I love that little cartoon. You probably have seen it, right? Where Jesus is talking to this young person on this park bench, and the young person has their cell phone out, and they said, "Now, how do I? What's your Facebook account? How do I follow you?" And Jesus says, "No, I want you to really follow me." So how do you speak that? So that's one of the enculturation issues. Working for justice, obviously, is another expression of mission, and then reconciliation. So those would be the six expressions of mission. And so some of the touchstones, I think, for catechists would be in the area of witness, maybe in the area of dialogue, clearly in the area of worship, clearly in the area of enculturation.
Since you speak with missionaries every day, I'm sure, in one way or another, and they share with you their challenges, their joys, their opportunities, their creativities. How, practically speaking, how do missionaries relate to catechists from missions around the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course, it's really a big world, and so, there's going to be a whole lot of diversity. When I was reflecting on this question, I was reminded of a young woman who was, she was a missionary, right? She was serving really the underserved in a Latin American country. She was well known by the bishop, and she was really designated by the bishop as the catechist. Now, within that culture, within that community, the catechist is almost like a parish administrator in our culture. They're not ordained, they're not vowed religious. It's a ministry that is being done on behalf of the church, in the name of the church. So one of the first things is that many missionaries serve as catechists. So that's, I think, a very important thing. And of course, that service to the community is largely shaped by the culture that they find themselves in. One of the reasons why many missionaries take a lot of time with language and culture is because they want to be able to accompany people quickly, rather than going through that whole awkward phase of, okay, now how do I say this? So that's I think that's one of the first things. The second thing, the word partnership just immediately leaped to mind. Missionaries are always trying to partner with the folks, the faithful that are there in whatever locale that they are. And so they are clearly trying to form those kind of partnerships and rely on the catechists to help them understand the community, to help them understand what we like to say, the griefs and joys, the anxieties and of the people, to know where they're coming from and what they're needing. Again, the emphasis is always to be with and for a people in their context, for their well-being. One of the concepts that is now used is integral human development. So a missionary, whether that missionary is going to be there for 3 years, 30 years, or 3 days, that missionary is to be with and for those folks, rather than trying to say, oh, you have a problem, I can fix it. The fix it approach to mission has thankfully fallen away. And it's really much more about being with. Now, there is actual service that is done in the sense of, pulling together the resources and the skills and the expertise you have and put them at the disposal of the people, as opposed to imposing your disposing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And as you're speaking, what strikes me is that that is, in fact, the most credible witness to the gospel. It's not only the words we say, but how we do it. And that's exactly kind of a reframing of how we're doing this, where accompaniment and partnership are the dominant sort of mode of being with people. This is one of the things that the Directory for Catechesis talks about in terms of the catechist. The catechist is one before they're actually doing anything or saying anything, they have to simply be with the other. Just that ministry of presence, I think, is so important. And I hear you, I hear that in what you're saying here, that it's so important to have that with and for with the community, rather than sort of a imposing from without my ideas of how this community should look like or should proceed. So that really is kind of, I see so many parallels, Don, with how we speak of catechesis, which is to always be with the other first. And in the context of that being with the other is all of the other things that we bring to, whether it's initiation, education, accompaniment, formation, all of those elements of the catechetical task. So
Yeah, and it's you're kind of getting a little deeper into this. There is, if you will, kind of a mutual purification that happens. We have a delightful story where a group of people came together and they did an intercultural Bible study. And the story was the story of the prodigal son. Now, I would guess if someone asked the question of our audience right here, why did the prodigal son starve? And I think most Americans, at least in this cultural study, most Americans chose, well, the reason why the prodigal son was starving was because he squandered everything. In another culture, their response was, well, the reason why he was starving is because there was a famine. There was a famine. And a third culture said, well, no, the reason why he was starving is because nobody would give him anything. Three different answers to the same question, and all of them are within the gospel story. So, that's what I meant by kind of mutual purification. I mean, one of the things the missionary has to be very sensitive to is how are their own cultural presuppositions getting in the way of them being with and for the people. On the other hand, they also have to be willing and able to articulate the truths that we believe are core to the gospel. The dignity of each person. Human trafficking is wrong. Those kind of things. So there is this mutual purification that happens. And so sometimes that conversation happens between and among missionaries and catechists.
finally, Don, could you briefly tell us about USCMA, the United States Catholic Mission Association, just briefly, kind of for our audience so that they are aware of your work?
Sure, be happy to. So we are an organization of missionaries. And so primarily we are organizations. So one of our members would be the Maryknoll fathers and brothers, but also the Maryknoll sisters. We have the Clumbards, the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, for example. But then we also have the Sisters of Notre Dame or the Sisters of Charity. So we have religious communities as members, and originally we were founded by those communities. But since then, we've also expanded to religious communities that focus in for, domestic mission, like the Glen Marys or the Josephites. Also, of course, you have dioceses that have mission offices. So they have become members. Parishes have become members. One of the webinars we did this past year, Jem, was we featured St. Margaret Mary Parish in Orlando, Florida, that has a very robust mission in Haiti. And they've really done a great job of developing that mission. And one of the things that's particularly interesting about their model is the way they have worked to include youth, young adults, and even the school children into the mission. So that's been a really wonderful conversation to have. So that's what we do. Now, obviously we're a membership organization. And so as an association, we do what associations do. We have programs, we have resources that we're developing, a newsletter, and of course, consultation services.
Dr. McCrabb, thank you so much for your time and your insights on the relationship of mission and catechesis. I'm very grateful for your insights. Many blessings on your work, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much. It's been a joy to be with you.
Thank you for joining in this conversation with Dr. Don McCrabb. Please stay tuned as we continue to discuss themes of impact and relevance in evangelization and catechesis. Till then, keep the faith and keep echoing the faith. I'm Dr. Jem Sullivan. I hope you have a blessed day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Echoing Faith Today, hosted by Dr. Jem Sullivan, produced by the School of Theology and Religious Studies at the Catholic University of America, and edited by Anthony Apostolides.